The photograph in your hand is dated 1852, yet it reveals a city skyline bristling with intricate metal spires and sky-high antennas that officially should not exist for another 100 years. Look past the horse-drawn carriages and the mud-caked streets of early San Francisco, Chicago, or Moscow. Above the soot and the steam of the mid-19th century, a disturbing contradiction rises into the clouds. These are not mere decorations. They are towering structures of impossible complexity, crowned with ornate globes and metallic arrays that look less like Victorian finials and more like high-frequency receivers. This visual evidence suggests a haunting possibility that modern history seems desperate to ignore. The internet did not begin in a California laboratory in 1969. It may have been the reclaimed ghost of a wireless world that was systematically dismantled before our grandfathers were born. We are taught that the Victorian era was a primitive stepping stone to our digital age, a time of flickering candlelight and slow, rhythmic clicking of the telegraph. The official narrative insists that the global exchange of information required thousands of miles of physical copper wires. Yet, hidden in the shadows of the Industrial Revolution, records from the early 1800s describe something else entirely: atmospheric vibrations and wireless signaling used by inventors whose names have been scrubbed from the mainstream record. There are accounts of individuals receiving messages through the very air, utilizing the Earth's own electromagnetic field as a carrier wave. If this sounds like science fiction, consider the architectural anomalies found in nearly every major world capital from that era. Buildings attributed to the neoclassical or Beaux-Arts styles feature massive domes topped with metallic rods and copper sheeting. Modern engineers often look at these decorative elements and see something else entirely: atmospheric energy collectors designed to pull resonance from the ionosphere. Nikola Tesla is often framed as a lone madman dreaming of a wireless future, but perhaps he was actually a man trying to reverse engineer a past that had been erased. His Wardenclyffe Tower in Long Island was not just a power station. It was designed as the world telegraphy system. Tesla claimed he could transmit not just electricity but also voice, images, and text to any point on the globe instantaneously using the Earth's natural frequencies. He spoke of this as a proven reality, not a distant hope. However, just as his vision began to materialize, his funding was abruptly severed by the giants of the financial world. The tower was not just shut down, it was dynamited, its steel sold for scrap, and its revolutionary blueprints lost in the fog of bureaucracy. The destruction was so thorough that it felt less like a business failure and more like a forensic cleanup of a technology that threatened the established order. The question remains: why would the most powerful men of the 19th century destroy a technology that could have united the world? The answer lies in the nature of the infrastructure itself. Wireless energy and information pulled directly from the atmosphere are nearly impossible to meter. You cannot put a price tag on a signal that is everywhere at once. Copper wires, on the other hand, provide a physical bottleneck. By forcing the world to adopt a wired grid, the financial elite of the 1800s ensured that every spark of energy and every word of data could be tracked, taxed, and throttled. The information age we live in today might actually be a controlled, inferior version of a much older, much freer network that was deemed too dangerous for the public to own. We were sold a version of progress that was actually a transition into a more sophisticated cage. If you examine the great world fairs of the late 1800s, like the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, the mystery deepens. These so-called white cities were constructed with a level of technological sophistication that seems impossible for the time frame. They were illuminated by millions of electric bulbs at a time when most homes still relied on whale oil for light. Some observers have suggested that these fairs were not showcases of new inventions. but rather grand displays of a fading civilization's technology before the structures were systematically demolished. Why were these magnificent, high-tech cities built out of supposedly temporary materials only to be burned or torn down months later? Or were they permanent stone structures, repurposed and then erased to reset the technological timeline of the masses? The architectural perfection of these sites suggests they were designed for long-term use, yet they were treated as disposable props in a grand historical play. There are scattered reports from the 1850s of mysterious vibrations felt by people standing near the large metallic flagpoles that were once ubiquitous in town squares. These poles were often topped with eagle motifs or orbs, similar to the components of a modern radio receiver. Some historical enthusiasts point to the great star forts found across the globe, massive, geometrically perfect structures that align with magnetic ley lines. While historians call them defensive fortifications, their design mirrors that of a modern-day motherboard or a frequency resonator. Their shapes are not dictated by the needs of ballistics, but by the mathematics of harmonics. If these sites were part of an ancient global network, the internet of the 1800s would have been more robust and faster than the fiber optics we rely on today, operating on the very resonance of the planet itself. The transition from this wireless world to our current reality was not a gradual evolution, but a violent interruption. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were marked by a series of catastrophic fires that leveled the old world sections of nearly every major city. From the Great Fire of London to the burning of Chicago and the leveling of San Francisco, the infrastructure of the previous era was wiped clean. In its place, a new world was built, one of coal, smoke, and endless miles of restrictive cabling. The metallic spires were replaced by chimneys, and the atmospheric collectors were rebranded as lightning rods or religious symbols, their true function forgotten by a generation raised on a new, sanitized version of history. It was a global reset, a scrubbing of the architectural hard drive that allowed a new narrative to be written over the ruins. Even the way we perceive time and distance was altered during this era. Before the mid-1800s, local time was fluid, dictated by the sun and the natural rhythms of the earth. The imposition of standard time was required by the railroad and telegraph monopolies to synchronize their wired networks. This was the moment humanity was plugged into a synthetic clock, moving away from the wireless, organic resonance of the previous age. We were told this was progress, but it may have been the final step in decoupling us from the natural signals of our environment. The dark reality of our history is the possibility that we are living in the ruins of a much more advanced society, using the recycled scraps of their knowledge while being told we are the pinnacle of human achievement. Consider the Aether, a concept that almost every scientist in the 1800s accepted as a fact. They believed the universe was filled with an invisible, high-frequency medium that conducted light and energy. This Aether was the backbone of their wireless technology. Then, almost overnight at the turn of the century, the Aether was declared a myth by a new wave of theoretical physics. The medium that made wireless internet possible was written out of the textbooks. Without the Aether, the public could no longer conceive of how energy could be pulled from the air for free. We were taught that space is a vacuum, and that we are isolated islands in a cold void, rather than nodes in a vibrant, connected web of energy. The deletion of a single scientific concept effectively blinded us to the potential of our own environment. The suppression of this knowledge continues into the modern day. We see echoes of it in the way certain patents are bought and buried, or how researchers who claim to have found over-unity energy sources are marginalized. The architecture of our cities still whispers the truth to those who know how to look. The strange, non-functional finials on old Victorian homes, the massive iron gates that seem designed to conduct rather than protect, and the oversized windows of old factories hint at a light source more powerful than gas lamps. These are the fossils of a digital ghost age. They are artifacts of a world where communication was as natural as breathing, and energy was as free as the wind. The internet we use today is a closed-loop system, a digital panopticon where every keystroke is recorded and every signal is metered. The hypothesized network of the 1800s, powered by atmospheric resonance, would have been the opposite, an open, decentralized field of information. By destroying the atmospheric power towers and the wireless arrays of the old world, the architects of the modern era didn't just win a commercial war, they won a war for the human mind. They traded a world of infinite connection for a world of controlled access. Our modern devices are not tools of freedom, but terminal nodes in a network that was built to replace something far more grand. As you look back at those old photographs, a feeling of wrongness persists. The people in the 1880s often look out of place among the grand, high-tech ruins of their own cities. They wear heavy wool and rags while standing in front of buildings that look like they were 3D printed by a more advanced civilization. They appear to be the resettlers, the survivors of a shift that reset the clock. They are using the grand libraries of the old world as warehouses and the power stations as stables. They have forgotten what the towers were for, just as we have been taught to see them as nothing more than decorative relics of a primitive past. We are looking at a population that inherited a technology they no longer understood, standing in the shadow of giants they were told never existed. The mystery of the 19th century internet isn't just a question of technology. It's a question of identity. If we were once a globally connected society with access to free, wireless information, then our current struggle for data privacy and energy independence is a manufactured one. We are fighting to regain a fraction of what was already ours. The signals may still be there, vibrating through the air, ignored by our modern sensors, but captured by the copper and stone of a forgotten era. We are like children playing with toy phones in a room that was once a mission control center. Every time a renovation project tears down an old building with a strange metallic spire, or a historical fire claims an archive of 19th century patents, the gap in our memory grows. The shadowy figures who managed the transition from the wireless past to the wired present left behind a trail of crumbs, but they also left behind a warning. They showed that an entire global infrastructure can be dismantled and replaced in less than a generation, provided the narrative is controlled tightly enough. The speed with which the world was wired is proof of how quickly the previous system was erased. The dark thriller of our existence is not that we are alone in the universe, but that we are alone in our own history. We are a species with amnesia, wandering through a high-tech graveyard we mistake for a modern world. The internet did not arrive with a modem and a phone line. It was taken from us, stripped of its power, and sold back to us in pieces. The towers are still there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize them for what they truly are. They are not tombstones of a primitive era. They are the antennas of a suppressed future. Perhaps the glitches we see in our modern digital world, the strange signal interference, the unexplainable data loss, the ghosts in the machine, are simply our crude technology bumping into the remnants of that older, more elegant network. The Victorian internet wasn't made of silicon and light. It was made of the earth itself. It was a system that didn't require a subscription or a password, only a resonance with the natural frequency of the world. It was a network that connected human consciousness to the planet. a connection that was severed to make room for a system that connects us only to a server. As we move further into a future of total digital surveillance, the story of the lost wireless age of the 1800s becomes more than a curiosity. It becomes a blueprint. If it existed once, it can exist again. The bankers and the industrialists of the 19th century knew that knowledge is only power if it can be withheld. They understood that the greatest way to manage a population is to make them forget they were ever free. They didn't just build a new world. They buried the old one so deep that we stopped looking for it. The next time you see an old photograph of a city from the 1850s, don't look at the people or the carriages. Look at the sky. Look at the spires that reach for the clouds, the intricate lattices of metal that serve no obvious utilitarian purpose, and the way the light seems to hit the buildings with an unnatural clarity. You aren't looking at the past. You are looking at a future that was stolen. The signal is still out there, buried under a century of noise, waiting for the right receiver to tune back in. The mystery remains open, a haunting whisper in the wires of a world that was never meant to be plugged in. We are surrounded by the evidence of our own greatness, hidden in the very architecture we walk past every day. The ghost in the machine isn't a glitch. It's a memory. Imagine the sheer scale of the erasure. Every city, every library, every patent office was overhauled to fit a story of slow, linear progress. We were told that the light bulbs of the Chicago World's Fair were a miracle of new science. Yet, the power to run them seemed to appear out of nowhere, without the massive, coal-fired plants we would expect today. We were told the great domes of the era were built for aesthetics. Yet they were lined with materials that conduct high-voltage electricity. We see the world through a lens ground by those who profit from our disconnection. The spires are silent now, but they are not empty. They stand as sentinels of a lost frequency. As we race toward a world of 6G and satellite constellations, we are merely trying to replicate what the people of 1850 already had. They didn't need satellites. They had the ionosphere. They didn't need fiber optics. They had the ether. We are not the pioneers of the information age. We are the scavengers, sifting through the ruins of a wireless empire, trying to remember the song that the earth used to sing. The mystery is not in what we are building, but in what we have forgotten.